S01E17 of the Potomac RPG Podcast. Double toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
Welcome one and all to the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I am your host and amulet of memory loss, Adam.
I'm your soul-devouring pocket watch, Matt.
I'm your demon-faced gold shield, Anthony.
And I am your fantastically powerful warhammer that makes you hate sunlight, Ben.
Oh man, this is great. This is a first for the Potomac RPG podcast. We have four people on the show. The software that we used previously limited it to 3, but that's been dropped temporarily. So we're giving 4 people a shot. We are actually just about to get into our first session of Dungeon World. So we're trying out a new system tonight. So we're all excited to see how that goes and figured, hey, why don't we just jump on and take care of the podcast while we're at it. So in terms of getting the show started, I wanted to bring up something that we got in response to last week's episode. If you remember last week, we were talking about warlocks, and our last question was from Withering Aurora, who asked whether or not warlocks needed a rework. Well, they wrote back and they had a pretty interesting or controversial opinion. And I wanted to see what you guys thought. So here's what they said. I'm going to kind of clip this a little bit as I read through, but this person says, thank you for covering my questions on your podcast. While listening to it, I agree to most of the points mentioned by you and your guests, that the disparity between long and short rest is fairly clear, and that other classes should get some alternate, if not subclass features that would incentivize a party to use short rest more frequently. So further down, he says, I believe the main issue as to why there is a short versus long rest disparity is due to the experience and expertise of the DMs, as well as the party's composition and play style. Seems pretty right on so far here. So the controversial part is comes in next, where he says, I personally believe, while controversial, and there would surely be a lot of people to disagree, but to give the warlock their 20th level capstone ability at level 1. While it would increase the warlock's power at level 1, it wouldn't be as strong as most people would believe. The feature itself is relatively weak, if not one of the worst capstone abilities in 5e, only beaten by the bard, sorcerer, and monk capstone abilities, from which all but bard are short rest restoration of abilities. By giving the warlock the ability to regain their spell slots over 1 minute rather than a short rest once per long rest, it would allow warlocks to feel less frustrating to play in games where the DM is less experienced and still figuring out how to balance between the two rests, while at the same time giving an easier time to warlocks during campaigns where the majority of the party isn't reliant on short rests. So, it was a great follow-up response. I'm really curious what you guys think. Matt, you were on last week's episode. What do you think of Withering Aurora's idea here?
Well, I mean, if and only if you're playing 1 to 2 encounters, it doesn't really make a difference, especially at low levels. So just as for clarification of the capstone, the Warlock capstone gives back your spell slots in 1 minute, as well as your Mystic Arcanum, which are your higher level spells you get as a Warlock. So at upper levels, those ordinarily only refresh on a long rest, the Mystic Arcanum. So if you're getting into that territory where you have the Mystic Arcanum, it's probably unbalanced to have it early. If you're just looking at the lower levels, where you haven't gotten the Mystic Arcanum yet, then it's it's just, instead of your 1 or 2 or 3 spell slots that you have that you would get on a short rest, you just get them back with a 1 minute prayer or whatever. I think it's just maybe easier, just if you want to try a simple kind of house rule, is just say spell slots and you have those, and you have, your couple of spell slots that you have them per battle, right? You can try doing that. If you're only doing one or two combats per long rest, it really won't affect things that much because you're already doing kind of a 5-minute day. So I don't think it hurts to experiment with something like that, but I would definitely be more cautious once the warlock gets to higher levels and they start getting their mystic arcanum, because those are supposed to be long rest abilities, and that's also part of the capstone.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, it was, I got to admit, when I first read it, I was like, what do you mean give a level 20 capstone to a level 1? But then as I read through it, it doesn't seem like the warlock has that ability doesn't seem all that strong. However, like you said, Matt, if it's gaining access to spells that should be long rest, well, then that might be a different story. Ben and Anthony, any comment on this warlock business of kind of switching things up?
Yeah. My gut reaction is it might not totally be on the GM as well. Like the party can say, hey, why don't we take a short rest, even if the DM isn't volunteering it. So unless the DM is saying that's not possible, then I mean, that's something a little bit more under the player's control. And then the other thought is also, like, just not all classes are great in all situations. Like if you bring a bunch of pterodactyls in a party in a combat against a bunch of fighters, they're going to get torn up. So like fighters and monks and warlocks, they're kind of long haul characters where they can go for a lot longer than because they can take short rests and get most of their stuff back. While other ones, like if you have a giant raid or something, want those people who can kind of burst and hit really hard, like wizards, and they pretty much expend everything in a matter of minutes and then they're done. Yeah. So it's just certain situations, certain characters shine more than others, but I don't think everything has to be equal.
Sure. Well, Ben, what do you think? Well, number one, Ben, have you ever played a warlock?
Yes, I happen to be playing one right now.
Really? Well, tell us about it.
Yeah.
So obviously, with this question, like if you were to apply this to your character, like, do you think that would make a difference?
I think it would make a difference. I've definitely felt that my warlock in particular, has been a little short on options. He's got 2 spell slots. He's currently level 4, and they seem to go really, really quickly. I mean, he's always using one for a Armor of Agathes, and he's using one to hex, and that's it. And if he puts a hex on a creature that doesn't die, like if you want to restrain a creature and not kill them, then you've lost your hex until you do a short rest.
Sure. So do you think that 1 minute kind of getting your spell slots back after a minute would help feel a bit more in control?
And making that like a long rest queuable ability, I think gives you a lot more flexibility to use it when you think you're going to need it. And I mean, sometimes the action is coming so quickly that you can't do a short rest, or there's danger, but you can take a 1 minute breather by barring the door or something.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I mean, regardless, Withering Aurora, I really appreciate you getting back in touch with us, and hopefully that gave you an idea of what we're thinking about your idea of granting the level 20 capstone ability to a level 1. Really interesting concept there. So we'll, don't see it happening anytime soon, but as a home role, why not give it a shot? So thanks again for the response. We're going to get into the topic for today, though. Is there anything worse than finding a magical item only to discover then, or worse later, that there's a curse on it? Total buzzkill. So we're going to talk about curses this week, ways they can be good, bad, or something in between. So all of us have either been cursed or given them to others. In our descent into Avernus, both Matt and Tom currently have cursed items. Ben, I believe you're cursed over in Score to Settle campaign, right?
Yes, I've been cursed with undeath.
Yes, and I had the Berserker axe way back in our first campaign that we played. So, what do you all think in general about curses? And I'm going to start with you, Matt. Like, what's your opinion of curses in general?
I actually really like curses. I think they can add a great deal to the game as long as they're not sort of, kind of the boring. Well, I have this item and now I can't equip it and I have to attack everyone. That's your berserker axe, I guess. But I think that really curses are best when they serve as story springboards. I think. I mean, let's see what everyone else thinks, but that's kind of my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Ben, let me shoot over to you first here, quick. What's your opinion on, since you are currently cursed? What's your opinion of that?
Oh, I really like it. Having great power, and great responsibility and trade-offs. That is really the fun stuff where storytelling actually happens. The gray in between lawful good and chaotic evil is where we like to play.
Absolutely. Now, Anthony, as the DM who cursed two of the three of us, what made you decide to go that route, or do you enjoy cursing your players?
Oddly enough, I don't make a lot of cursed items. I think Ben's curse came out of our genie sorcerer. We kind of gave her the ability to make wishes.
That's right.
And that's kind of turned out to be actually fantastic for the plot because it just throws everything out of control all the time. But it brought Ben back and gave him a curse with it. Then there's some plot details that are developing from that.
Sure.
But yeah, I think they can be interesting. I think some curses can be interesting when they affect the rest of the party more than it affects the person who's cursed. So the person who's cursed gets the benefit and the party suffers from it.
So you mean like a berserker axe?
Exactly.
Oh, my little halfling barbarian loved that berserker axe. And I think, at the time, I was just so into that character, and I loved the fact that if anyone was around me and I failed that wisdom save, and as a barbarian, my wisdom wasn't that great, it was on. I was trying to shove people off cliffs and chop them in the back. It was a lot of fun for me. I don't know how much fun it was for everyone else.
No, I think it made it a lot interesting. It added another tactical element to it.
Yeah, we had to have a mitigation like at the end of every battle. So it's like, all right, we just triumphed over whatever. Oh shit, Finbin.
The best thing is that after every battle, you guys were like, we really got to do something about that curse, but no one ever did. It just kept going and going, and I loved it. But anyway, let's get into some questions for the week. The first post that we have comes from Reddit user JF Gotch, who asks, identifying a magic item and cursed items, Dungeon Master's Guide. So D&D Beyond states, at the end of the rest, a short rest dedicated to learning magic items properties, the character learns the item's properties as well as how to use them. Does this mean that a magic item can't have a secret effect, positive or negative? I suppose I could consider some negative effects a curse, and in accordance with those rules, the character would learn about the positive effect only. Do you agree? What if the negative effect isn't actually a curse? And in any event, what about a secret positive effect? So, Anthony, what are you thinking on this? Can a magic item have a secret effect without it being learned during Identify?
I think, by the rules, I think it's supposed to be revealed, but I would almost say most GMs homebrew something around that or just kind of read that differently. So if you're a GM who likes to kind of trickle out the details secretly, you'll probably do that. But also some cursed items are more complex than others. So for example, some might just have an immediate tactical effect and others are more story-based, like what we're seeing with in Descent into Avernus. So I think by the rules, I think it's supposed to reveal it, but I think most people just homebrew around that.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think in terms of a negative effect that isn't a curse. Ben, Matt, do you have any ideas on what that might be or could be?
Well, I mean, well, Ben, go.
Okay, so the belt of dwarven kind makes you grow a beard. Not everybody wants a beard. Like a female character, perhaps?
I
like,
take
"What?"
offense to that. No, are you kidding me? Everybody wants a beard. No, okay, I can see that. I wasn't looking at a beard as a negative effect. I think that's positive for everybody, but I can kind of see your point of view. Is there another example that you guys have of a negative effect?
Yeah.
Yeah, you go ahead.
So I was thinking of. I mean, it is kind of negative, but not for the wielder per se. I was thinking of a classic Ravenloft item, actually, a dagger, which you may have heard me mention before, called the Fang of the Nosferatu. And
Oh, yeah.
so that dagger grants its wielder immortality. And all they have to do for the low price of committing 13 consecutive murders on 13 consecutive nights. So it's like, hey, it's not a. I mean, the item has another effect, which is a curse, but that effect per se isn't actually a curse. But it's kind of a bad thing when viewed from a global social standpoint.
All right. Well, do you think that's something that should be known through the identify spell, though? Or do you think it can get by without it?
So, I mean, I think, I would sort of agree with Anthony that, it's really the DM's call about what works best for the game. I mean, I'm inclined to sort of allow like an Arcana roll or something to see like how much obscure stuff you get out about the item. It's like, oh yeah, this item can grant immortality. Oh yeah, this item grants immortality if you murder people with it. Oh, this item grants immortality if you murder people with it, but it will slowly sap your life away if you're ever separated from it. Like at increasing levels of difficulty, you kind of, learn a little bit more, so you may get more or less surprised depending on your kind of how good you are at arcane lore. I kind of feel that's kind of in the spirit of the game, but again, I think it's really up to the DM to make that type of decision.
I agree. Well, that good responses there. Hopefully that helps out JF Gotch in terms of what we think on that. There's does seem to be a lot of gray area in there, but I would agree too with Anthony. DMG is pretty specific on some of those things, but if you don't want it to be found out, who the hell cares? Just do it, right?
I have news here.
And the sound of Ralphie the News Goblin can mean only one thing. It is time for Potomac RPG News. All right, so there's an article that came out this week from comicbook.com by Christian Hoffer titled Making Curses a True Threat in Dungeons & Dragons. In the article, Christian writes about some ways DMs can bump up the impact of curses. It's pretty general advice, but certainly some useful things in there. Ben, looking through this article, anything stand out to you?
So in this article, he is basically saying that you can remove a curse at level 5 if you've got a cleric, warlock, or wizard in your party, and that makes curses just no fun at all. Every curse, remove curse, no problem. And most parties are getting their big magic items around level 4, level 5, so why have a curse at all? Yeah. So he's got some... Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, that even assumes that you want to wait for that spell. In most temples, you can just go pay 90 gold for it and get remove curse. I mean, you can just buy that as a service.
Yeah, 90 gold seems like a low price. That's like bargain basement prices to remove a curse.
Yeah, and if you do 9, I think the 10th one's free. They stand.
You get a punch card, right? well, Anthony, what do you think about some of the author's views on curses? I mean, you've given out enough of them. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say you either need to give them out like candy to where it's just part of life that you're going to get cursed or pick up some corrupt stuff, or you have to make them so special that they're exempt from that remove curse kind of stuff and it's part of the plot or something like that. So
yeah, I got to agree with you. Like the remove curse spell and the ability within the a temple really always bothered me too, because it basically made curses meaningless and more of an annoyance than anything. And I think the difference in cases with some of the curses that we've dealt with was the fact that, like, it was either hidden or we didn't have access to either the spell or the temple. And it was like this very kind of plot driven part of it that really moved the story along. But just the idea of picking something up and, oh, it's cursed. Okay, well, we go into town and get it removed. Yeah, that seems like an awful lot of work for the DM for something that can be fixed in a heartbeat.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same like cure disease and other things. Like you can craft this interesting disease, and then the cleric just takes it off in a couple seconds.
Yeah, like I remember back in season 1, there was it the mud method or something, and Kai was got this disease, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like he's going to have to deal with that. What's going to happen? And then he was like, remove disease right off the bat, and it was like, well, what the hell was the point of that?
Yeah.
So anyway, and looking through the article, Ben, did you see any like tips that this person had that would help?
Yeah, he put in quite a few tips about kind of making it more difficult to remove by having specific requirements. And I like some of his suggestions, actually all of his suggestions, adding a specific material component that kind of ties into the type of curse. That's really cool. Something that you have to do like a fetch quest for.
Mm-hmm. You could even consider giving that disease or that curse like a death saving throw. So it's not just a single use of the spell that gets rid of it. It's just like it has its own life. So you have to get 3 successes in a row or something to that effect.
Oh yeah, or yeah, I'm trying to see if it was in the article, but linking that, instead of a fetch quest, maybe a kill fest, where the curse can only be broken by killing whatever gave you the curse or responsible.
Kill 100 goblins and suddenly
it's
like an achievement, right? But I was actually thinking about that article, and it actually sort of fed in very well to sort of other types of curses that I've seen in some other systems, like Ars Magic. Anyone who listens to knows I love that game. But the idea is that that a curse should be able to have varying levels of power. In old Ravenloft games, there was like troublesome curses versus higher severity curses like lethal curses, and so the idea being that maybe your basic remove curse is only good for kind of low level ones and would need to be higher slot. And I think the article mentions that. But one thing I would like to sort of point out with curses is I think like that the severity and the power of a curse should be proportional to the specificity of the curse. For example, if you steal food from that old Vistani woman and she gives you the curse of thinner, right? That's very specific and that should be hard to remove. And additionally, if a curse has an escape clause, I mean, that's a classic fairy tale type of thing, and your sword shall always break till you overcome a foe, with your fists or something like that, right? That type of thing should make a curse more powerful and harder to get rid of by just kind of rote spells, because it's kind of tailored. It gives a tailoring and a specificity. And it would have been cool to kind of use these ideas to sort of build like a curse system, sort of what do you need to get rid of a curse with this severity and this specificity and this type of escape clause. I think there's sort of the roots for an interesting subsystem here, which I hasn't really been fully explored, but maybe in the future, sort of be a source or expansion.
That escape clause is interesting. It could be that remove clause or remove curse just basically adds an escape clause, so it doesn't actually remove it. It just creates a door, and then you can actually go through it.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, that was really good ideas. I agree that Dungeons and Dragons doesn't really have a good curse system set up, and definitely seems to lend itself towards different systems. I'm just reading through Dungeon World in preparation for tonight. I can see that being a decent system to be able to handle a curse, because it's not so specific as I have a spell for this. There's going to be a plot line attached to it. There's going to be some way to do it, and it's all about success and failure instead of, yes, I'm level 5 and I have this spell and I'm ready to cast it. So interesting stuff. I really like it. It got me thinking about how curses are used in the game, and good article. So if you're interested, check that out. That's at comicbook.com. It's called Making Curses a True Threat in Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to step out for a moment right now, but stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break.
As any tabletop role player would know, coffee is an essential commodity for those 4-hour sessions we all go through. And a great place to get that coffee is foundfamiliar.com. Found Familiar is a couple of people with a passion for coffee creation and D&D, and they've teamed up with favorite artists from all around the world to bring specialty grade coffee that celebrates the creativity sparked by Dungeons & Dragons and other TTRPGs. Use the coupon code Potomac RPG, all one word, at checkout for 10% discount on your purchase. That's at foundfamiliar.com. And with that, let's get back to the show.
All right, how about another question? This comes from Reddit user, Nifducole92, something like that, who asks, help with managing curses. At this point in our story, all of my players have contracted some level of curse or corruption in their attempt to take down the big bad evil guy. One player is undead, Death Cleric player. One has lycanthropy, and another has the Aboleth Slime curse. I wanted to thematically unify their conditions within the framework of the world they've been playing in, but need some sort of number system to give it some crunch. I'm thinking of using corruption rules created by Matthew Mercer on DM's Guild at this point. Does anyone have experience with Mercer's corruption system? As a player or DM, have you had fun dealing with curses? Finally, does anyone have any good recommendations for curing the curses other than spamming various healing or restoration spells? So we hit a few of those already in our previous question, but Anthony, there's a number of different questions within this post. Any advice that you can give this person?
I'm personally finding some beauty in not trying to define rules so much. Depending on your comfort level with it, you could kind of thematically describe that as like remove cursed is cast. It's lessening the effect of certain things. So like you've reduced the chance of you turning into a werewolf on a full moon, or it's suppressed or something. So you can have kind of degrees of reduction, or inversely like degrees of how bad it is. So that's the only thing that's jumping out at me.
Yeah, that's the absolutes are usually not fun. It's the gray area in between that is fun. So playing around in that area, I really like the idea of reducing the effectiveness of a curse rather than wiping it out or amplifying it if you're doing something that's making it worse. I like that concept rather than getting bogged down in some of the crunch. Matt, what do you think on this?
So I think the curses that the poster mentioned there are all transformative curses in a way, or progressively transformative curses. And I think that's actually a pretty fun thing to play. And I'm going to sort of invoke the old Ravenloft setting again, because I think it's actually very thematic to curses. And there was sort of this idea of not just regular curses, but also like if a person's tainted by evil, that they do progress to becoming some kind of monster. And it was actually certain kinds of evil acts would cause it to progress. Now, I think Anthony's right. I think it's probably better to handle those things in a more plot way versus, say, the corruption points that Matt Mercer suggests, which can be fun if you want sort of a uniform system. But I think curses really are story elements ultimately, and I think it's kind of helpful if the DM plots out certain actions that would make it worse and certain actions or spells that could slow it down, and maybe at some point, a doorway out if they can find it, if they can somehow cleanse themselves. And I think it really is best to handle from that type of story angle.
You touched on something really important there, and I really think you hit the nail on the head that it has to make sense, like within a story. Random curses just in order to do a curse doesn't really have a whole lot of impact to it. Doesn't seem very much fun. If it makes sense, like if the curse that you get is related to the story in some way. So like Matt, I think of you with your current character Decorius, with that cursed shield.
I don't know if I'd call that a
Well,
field
yeah,
curse.
maybe. Okay, all right.
Makes me powerful.
Well, it does. So I should say we don't know if there's any kind of hidden negative effect in there just yet. But like that made sense to the story. It makes sense that something's going on. Or with Tom's character, Andreas, who picked up that staff. He is holding a cursed item right now. And it's specifically related to the story. And I really like that. I think it makes sense. It makes it a lot more impactful to the other players around the table and to the player that got cursed, because that brings them into the story more. I don't know if you agree on that, Ben, like whether that's an important aspect to curses.
So at our table, I think that works really well. But some people really don't like playing in a big overarching scheme of the campaign and just want to get out their big table, roll some dice, and see what happens. And that's a good way to play. The things that you get off of that table can develop into a story. I mean, all the wish spells wishes that our Genasi sorcerer has made have propelled our story in completely unpredictable ways, which have been fantastically fun. And each of those has a boon and a curse kind of coupled together. And just like cursed items, that's the fun stuff.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Stormlight archives, the boom and the curse together, or the boon and the curse, where you'll get something good, but there's going to be something bad right there along with it. And I really like that aspect of those Genasi wishes that we've used in the Score to Settle campaign. So, well, have any of you dealt with Matthew Mercer's corruption rules? I haven't personally. Not sure if any of you three have.
No,
not personally.
So afraid we're not too much help on that one. But the other questions, hopefully, that gave you some advice you might be able to use. But curious to see what Matthew Mercer's stuff is. I'll have to look that up. But regardless, we're going to move into another segment here. There aren't a whole lot of cursed items in 5th edition. In fact, the DMG only has 5 official cursed items, not including the Bag of Devouring, which technically isn't a cursed item. Anyway, so let's see if we can make our own cursed items in our long-running segment. Let's build something. Welcome to Let's Build Something, where we get to put our creativity to the test and build something live for all the world to hear. In this week's segment, we're going to be building some handy cursed items to throw into a world. So here's how it'll work. I found this old post from 4 years ago by Reddit user Famous Hippopotamus, where they made a nice little table to roll on in order to make cursed items. Each of us will roll 3d6 on the table to get the basics down. Then we'll fine tune it from there. So let's get rolling here. You guys ready?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. So what I need you guys to do is go ahead and grab 3 d6s and go ahead and roll them. So you all can do that now. All right, so Matt, what did you get?
So I got a 4, a 5, and a 5.
All right, so you are going to have a hidden curse that is persistent and is removable as well. All right. So Ben, how about you?
I have 4, 6, and 1.
Okay. So your curse is also hidden. And what I mean by hidden is you can't discover it through the identify spell. You have a latent strength, which means it's tied only to the object and does not affect the cursed victim if the object's discarded. And then it's also removable, just like Matt's was. So, Anthony, go ahead and roll or what's yours?
Yeah, I got a 6, a 4, and a 6.
Okay, so you have open visibility, so it can be identified with the identified spell. You have a persistent strength on it, and it is a permanent curse. It cannot be removed through the remove curse spell. All right, so you guys got your kind of parameters for a cursed item. Matt, we're going to jump over to you first. So what did you come up with for your cursed item?
I'm going to call this the Potion of Maximum Healing. And
Okay.
so it appears to be a run-of-the-mill healing or greater healing or something potion like that. And the curse is this. So when you first you drink the potion, so it's expendable, but the curse is persistent. It remains after you drink it. It gives you the healing that you expect, but it's too good because every time you long rest, your max hit points increase by 1. And for those of you who remember in 3rd edition sort of the effect of positive energy plane, well, that's this kind of thing. So every time you long rest, your max HP goes up by 1, which is an advantage. But if it reaches twice your maximum hit points, you explode in a shower of positive energy.
I like it. Very nice.
But if you recognize it in time, you could remove it with remove curse because it is removed.
So the Potion of Maximum Healing. Very nice. Okay. Ben, let's turn to you. What is your cursed item?
Okay, I've got a set of armor. We're just going to go with leather for the sake of explanation, and it looks good. It's very nicely tailored. You put it on though, and oh my God, what's that smell? Oh, it's so rancid. Oh, I can't bear that. I can't get it off though. So you need to go to visit the cleric to get a remove curse cast on it. So that's the rancid leather armor.
The rancid leather armor. Very nice. Okay. And Anthony, let's go over to you. Last, what's your cursed item?
I think mine's a sibling of Ben's. I have the Messy Axe. It's a +1 weapon, and it does an extra 1d6 on a crit. However, when you get that crit, you roll a random ally within 10 feet, and they are splattered with blood and gore. And that target, so this is covered head to toe.
This is like Rushka's axe, basically.
Yeah,
exactly. Yes.
We got a couple of party members who wouldn't mind at all.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that target must
So
make a
does the
DC 12 con
splashed
save
blood
or
have an
fall
effect?
prone with disgust.
Oh,
Yeah.
Nice.
Target must make a DC 12 con save, or they fall prone with disgust. So, but either way, they're covered in gore.
Nice. I like it. So we have the Potion of Maximum Healing, the Rancid Leather Armor, and the Messy Axe. I think that's pretty damn good, guys, for being on the spot like that. I know I couldn't think of a cursed item that quickly, so really well done. I could see all three of those being used in a game somewhere. So that was Let's Build Something. I'm impressed, guys. Awesome job. Let's get into our last post of the week this week. This comes from Reddit user El Mutanto, who asks, how would you handle a curse that makes a creature tiny, 15 centimeters, 5.9 inches? One player is creating a new character for our level 7 group. We are thinking about a curse that made him very small because it makes sense from multiple perspectives. He wants to lift the curse that for the time he is tiny. How would you handle it mechanically? I don't want to buff or debuff him too much. I would like a balanced mix of some buffs and debuffs, something like this. Disadvantage on everything strength related, and advantage on dexterity saves and stealth, for example. He wants to play a battlesmith artificer, so he will attack with intelligence. So a tiny person curse. Matt, what do you have for this one?
So when I first saw this, I said, "Wow, this is like a really terrifying curse." But then I realized it actually applies to his whole body. So I think I would take a little bit of guidance actually from Final Fantasy IV, which actually had a spell that made you or the enemy tiny. So that one didn't affect your attack rate, your attack chances at all, but it did reduce your damage to 1. I don't know if I would go that far to make physical attacks totally ineffective, but I'd probably reduce them by 2 or maybe even 3 die, because you're still probably able to attack okay, but if your sword is now the size of a sewing needle, you're not going to be doing much damage. I think I would still let spells and other supernatural abilities work normally, except maybe I'd reduce the range a bit because you're smaller. Maybe the range should be somewhat reduced. I don't know if I'd give advantage on dex saves, but I would probably give advantage, or rather, I would give disadvantage to enemies attacking you because you are pretty tiny. I mean, you're not non-existently small or invisible, but you're pretty tiny. So I could see a disadvantage on enemies trying to hit you. So you can, I think by the rules, actually, you can occupy the same square as your allies and use your allies for cover. So that's probably the mix of things that I would do with a tiny curse of tininess.
Yeah, I mean, I could see disadvantage for anybody attacking from range. If there's a tiny thing in front of me, melee style, should be pretty easy to club to death.
I don't know. You're gonna bend down all the way to hit that guy that's standing.
No, I'm just gonna lift my boot and squish it. That's what I'm gonna do. But yeah, it's interesting because I think something I saw within the post itself was talking about like movement speed, and like the movement speed according to the DMG would only be like 5 feet.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty severe, and sometimes, and in real life, there's a lot of small things that scurry fast. So I mean, you could chalk that up to the nature of the curse, because I think that would be a pretty harsh penalty.
That would be harsh. Now, luckily, it's an artificer, so you're not dealing with a melee combatant. And I know the artificer has a lot of neat toys that it can do. Now, when it comes to, I think, doesn't Battlesmith get the homunculus or something like that? Maybe a disadvantage in terms of getting that thing moving, or maybe it rides the homunculus in order to move around the battlefield. That was
an idea I had for a character, actually.
Oh yeah,
small character riding a medium homunculus. Yeah.
It's like that Mortal Kombat character. I forget what their names are. The little girl who rides the back of the big dude. But I think that'd be a pretty cool thing, and really make that tiny curse come alive. Anthony, what do you think on this tiny person curse?
Yeah, this one's a little tough because everything kind of has to translate to mechanics, and so you don't want to totally brutalize your players. But I mean, 15, I think you said 15 centimeters. That's like basically a Smurf. I mean, I'm looking at my router and that's like 6 inches tall. So, I mean, I don't know how threatening that could really be. I mean, we're being very generous in saying it only gets disadvantage. So I would almost end up playing that differently for the player. I mean, that guy's basically doing Shadow of the Colossus at that point. I mean, his game should be different. So he should be climbing, making dex checks to climb his targets and then pinpoint their weakness, and then when he stabs them they get stunned or something. I mean, his game is just different.
That's very true. Well, Ben, for some reason I have a feeling that you would love to play a tiny person. What do you think about this curse?
Okay, yeah, I would love to play a tiny person. I think there was a lot of opportunities to do very interesting things in there. The first thing that comes to mind is stealthing. I think that it would be you're the size of a rat, and they are some of the stealthiest creatures that you can have. They get in and out of everything. If it's at nighttime, you don't even see them. I would at least give advantage on all stealth checks to this character just because they are so tiny.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love the idea of just riding around in someone's pocket too. Like screw you don't even have to worry about the movement rules. Like you can just hop from person to person and, you ride along. And the reason I picked on you there, Ben, is like you have such an interesting way about your characters. And I could just see you looking at this curse and saying, "Oh, that's not a bad thing. I'm going to use
an
the hell out
opportunity."
of this." Exactly. So, but pretty interesting. Hopefully, for El Mutanto, that gives you an idea of some ways that you can handle this curse. Interesting idea. I personally really like it. The number side of things is hard to make the numbers work, but if you're a little bit more open and flexible, I think is a really cool idea for a curse.
Might be worth watching the Ant-Man movies.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. Get some good ideas. So that's going to do it for us this week. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@potomacrpg.com. If you'd like to support the Potomac RPG podcast, you can find us on coffee.com/PotomacRPG. And lastly, you can follow us at Potomac_RPG on Twitter and at Potomac RPG on Instagram and YouTube. So thanks for being on today, everybody. Really cool to have 4 people on for a show. It was really interesting to have so many voices in here. And thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew and, of course, all of our wonderful listeners out there. So for the Potomac RPG podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Matt.
I'm Anthony.
And I'm Ben.
Until next time, keep those dice rolling, keep those stories coming, and
never
stop playing.
There was no way it was going to work with this one.
Who are you tonight, Adam?
I know. Cursed item.
Something that gives forgetfulness, perhaps?